Welcome into Overtime, presented by McDonald's. Along with John Bruce, I'm Dewey Dailey. As we bring you into today's show, John, the halfway point is behind us, and we're just a day away from kicking things off in the second half. So we'll talk a little bit about the previous week as well as what's coming up here in Week 6. Should be a fun time.
Yeah, I'm always excited for Friday, especially when it's football Friday night. I won't say that too many more times. That's probably going to be it. I apologize to all of our viewers, but I'll still stick with Friday, but just not football Friday. Yeah, that's a little too much.
Yeah, I had a little bit of Saturday. I don't know what play on words I could use for that, but a little Saturday night football.
Sensational
this past week.
Saturday.
There we go. I think we've had football about every day of the week that I'm guessing they don't obviously play on Sunday. They might play on Wednesday. I doubt it, but we had a Thursday game to open it up and a Saturday game to end the first half. So a lot of variety for I feel like 7 live streams for football in 5 weeks is pretty good.
Yep.
And, we'll probably, I'm not sure if we'll have any more double ups in the same week, but, probably get into some playoff football as well. I know we talked about on Saturday how they're not doing the Friday-Saturday thing this year, which would probably be our only chance to do 2 games in 1 week.
Not a big fan of them going to one game. And
well, considering all the referee issues, you'd think of any year, this would be the year you do that.
Like our game Saturday had a good referee crew, but it was mostly because they were available since it was Saturday.
Right, only game in the area.
Yeah, only game in the area, and so we were fortunate enough to have a pretty experienced crew on that game, and that's not always the case. And and then we're going to have first round of playoff games where it's going to be maybe some tough ones. But yeah, so it was exciting to be able to get out there and do the halftime show, and there's a couple. Friday's game wasn't as I think good as we thought it was going to be.
Yeah. As competitive.
Yeah, as competitive. But Saturday was
about as good as it gets.
Yeah. Not the cleanest, but
no, definitely not. A lot of penalties.
A lot of turnovers, but those teams played super hard and made it for a really interesting Saturday night.
So the first game review from Week 6, we'll go game reviews and then talk some impact players and some game previews along with the power rankings to wrap it up. We'll start with Piketon at Zane Trace, our Friday night live stream. What was dubbed the first SVC test for Piketon as they started off the non-league 3-0 and then picked up a win Week 4 against Huntington. So, John, you want to give us a little insight on that matchup?
So we didn't really know what to expect because on Thursday, when you got the starters, Carter Langley for Zane Trace was not listed as their starting quarterback. So we didn't know what to expect because their starting quarterback from Week 4, Gunnar McCullough, was out offensively. He was able to play a little bit defensively. He didn't. I don't think he played the second half. So, we didn't know what to expect. Adena's teams they had played so far up until that point, or not Adena. Piketon's teams that they had played so far up to that point were 1 and
16.
No, it was 1. Goshen won.
Oh, did they?
Yeah, Goshen had the 1 win. So yeah, they were 1 and 15 or 1 and 14 because Oak Hill didn't play 1 week.
Oh man, I was saying 0 and 16 all the time. I was wrong.
It's
it was 1 and 14.
Goshen won late, and and they beat another not very good Division III team. But so Piketon's non-league schedule, which is you can never predict what's going to happen with some of the schools. Like Oak Hill's been a pretty good program for a while, and that didn't really expect them to fall in the hard times that they have this year. So Piketon really hadn't been tested at all. Goshen, that game was tight. They came back in that game, but Zane Trace went out up their non-league schedule, which started off a 1 and 2 start. But they had won 2 straight coming into that game, but they had to go with Blake Phillips at the Wildcat. Now, Carter Langley did play probably 15 to 20 plays in the game, so he was on his way back. But he was clearly not not the running threat he normally is. And first possession of the game, Piketon gets the ball and just goes right down the field. 6 plays. I think it was like 71 yards.
It was like a minute 57 or something.
Yeah.
It was pretty easy.
Yeah. And Luke Gallia with a nice pass to Seth McGuire for
Brent McGuire.
Brent McGuire.
Close enough.
Yeah, Seth McGuire is the baseball coach at
757.
yeah, and at Adena right now.
Oh, at Adena.
Yeah, so Brent McGuire, yes, with I believe it was a 19-yard touchdown reception. And then they got a stop as Zane Trace went into their Wildcat. They were not able to advance the ball very far, and then looked like Piketon was driving, but kind of stalled out after a penalty. And from there, it was virtually all Zane Trace until, the last 4 minutes of the game, as it was a lot of Blake Phillips right, Blake Phillips left, a little bit of Blake Phillips at the middle, but a lot of Riley Hartzell at the middle as well. Those two really carried the load for the Pioneers. Hartzell scored from 8 yards out to go up 7-6. I believe it was late might have been the beginning of the second quarter.
Yeah, I think first quarter Piketon was 6-0, yeah.
Yeah, and then late in the half, Phillips scored from a little bit further out to make it 14-6 at the half, and that's something that was key. Now, Jacob Wise, our colleague that he calls the radio games for WKKJ in the fall, he had said to us that Piketon's got to get their extra point kicking under control because they had really struggled with it, and they were going for 2. Well, they did not get the 2-point conversion the first time, or any time. Yeah, Zane Trace's Judah Hanks was perfect in the first half, was 2 for 2 on extra points for the 14-6 lead at the half. And me and your dad talked at the half about how, this doesn't feel like it's out of hand for Piketon. It'd be nice for them if they could get a stop and then go down and score. Well, they did not get a stop because to open the second half, Zane Trace's Aiden Dunn went 84 yards down to the 2-yard line
on the kickoff.
On the kickoff return for one of the worst kickoffs you can have or returns you can have to get tackled at the 2. But 2 plays later, Blake Phillips punched it in, went up 21-6. Piketon was able to get a score back after something that had happened that I don't know if I'd ever seen before, where the officials had to get out like a playing card to differentiate.
There was a case of that in the NFL.
Yeah.
But that wasn't, I can't remember what game it was, but that wasn't in the rule book. That wasn't an official, if it's this close, pull out a card. And I'm pretty sure after, first of all, I don't even know why the referee, I don't know if it was maybe just a rule book or whatever, but I think after that game that practice got outlawed. I don't think you can do that anymore.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
they did it on Friday.
Oh, that was long. That was it seemed like they were measuring that for 2 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, it was a big play. It was a 4th down and 2. Gallia got hit. It looked like the spot was good. I wasn't sure if it was a good spot, but I thought the spot got him the first down, but then the Zane Trace kids were celebrating. Then they brought out the chains. They still hadn't decided, and so they brought out something to decide if they had got there. Yeah, probably some sort of card. And it was deemed to be a first down, and the next play, Zane Brownfield hammered his way in, made it 21-12, but Zane Trace scored. I believe it was Phillips again scored, and then on the ensuing kickoff, Aiden Dunn, the 84-yard kickoff return you would think might have been his biggest play of the game, but his biggest play of the game was Jordan Harrington, the kickoff specialist for Zane Trace, perfectly placed his kickoff down along the sideline, and Aiden Dunn sprinted down there and covered it up before Piketon could get to it. I think it was 3 plays later, Carter Langley scored, made it 35-12, and it was all over but the shouting as, Adena again. Piketon went down and scored to make it 35-18, and then they scored again with 15 seconds left to make it 35-24. So it was a big game for Zane Trace. Blake Phillips with over 100 yards rushing. Silas Stewart was nearly 100 yards receiving as he made a couple of big-time plays in the jet sweep game.
Oh, I forgot those count as
passes. Little pitches. Yeah. Those are the best. Those are the best for the quarterbacks because you drop it, it's not a fumble. And then Riley Hartzell was close to 100 yards rushing as well. For Piketon, Buddy Wilson was over 100 yards. rushing.
I think Mason Thacker had
Mason
like
Thacker
11
had
for,
11 catches for over 130 yards receiving and a score. Brent McGuire had 2 scores. Levi Gullion had a couple of touchdown passes, or 3 touchdown passes in the game, a little over 200 yards passing. They for Zane Trace, it was a big win because they had won the last 2 weeks. North Union was seen as a big win, but they're still 1-4.
North Union.
Yeah, but then they seem to struggle with Adena, not really being able to slow down, get them off the field. 49-39 is a really high scoring for that Zane Trace defense. For them to go out and go right back to what had worked the last couple of years, the ground and pound, and just relying on your offensive line and your running backs to make plays, really paid off big for them for a pretty emphatic win there on Friday night.
Yeah, and then we'll take it to Saturday and then come back to Friday for our last 2. I'm guessing we probably could have shooken up the order a little bit as the SOSA group chat is just going crazy right now. West at Waverly. This one, you know what? We'll flip the order around. We'll go Logan and Chillicothe first, and then, John, you'll do your second game, and then we'll save the West and Waverly game for last just to keep the chronological order going. So Logan at Chillicothe. It was the first win of the season for Chillicothe. They take it 17-14 in an old SEOAL. I don't know if it was a rivalry game, but again, SEOAL game nonetheless. No official statistics for this game. You'd think with the Chillicothe Gazette we might have a little statistics, but it's no biggie.
Now they're down to one writer. He does what he can. But, I mean, there's so many schools to cover.
Jack. Yeah. So we'll just go a little scoring summary. Logan led 14-3 at the half, and then second half Chile wins at 14-0 with their first win of the season. I think Logan was 1-4, so they're now, 1-3, and now they are 1-4. So both teams 1-4. Logan still unaffiliated. I don't know if there are any.
They'll be in the OCC, I think, next year.
Next year,
I think it's next year.
I wasn't sure if it was next year or the year after. And then, for Chillicothe, they really a much-needed win as they start league play this upcoming week with Hillsborough. For Logan, they take on Athens, and what I would view as a pretty winnable game for the Chieftains. We saw Vinton County take down Athens last week, although Vinton County actually trailing in that game for a little bit. But Logan, I think, definitely a winnable game at home against Athens. A little showdown over at whatever that field is called. There's a lot of different names for Chillicothe's field.
I always just call it
the Obadiah Complex.
I always call it Herrnstein Field just because that's what it was when I was growing up. I know it's got a couple of different names, but Herrnstein Field's still affiliated with it. Now, one thing about Chillicothe with their non-conference schedule, St. Charles just lost their first game last week. They're 4-1. London 5-0. Westville North 5-0. And Harvest Prep just fell to 3-1, but Harvest Prep just lost to one of the top ranked teams in Indiana, and by that I mean all of Indiana, regardless of size. So it's definitely a nasty non-league schedule for them to get ready for league play. So for them, it's a big win to get some confidence going into that. And then we'll see if they can build off that as they have a crazy schedule because they got 2 more home games back to back, and then they're on the road for the last 3 weeks of the season.
I will say, for Hillsborough, I don't think this is, I don't know their record off the top of my head, but this is a Hillsborough team that's, sort of been impressive throughout the first half. Even in some losses they've had, they've looked pretty impressive. So not going to be an easy game at all for Chillicothe. But I think
not really the Hillsborough that's been the last few years.
But I even think for Chillicothe, even though they're 1-4, especially week 1 against St. Charles, they almost. I think the final it was less than 1 score. Yeah, I mean, so that one came down to the wire. I think this Chillicothe team is pretty talented, and when you get games like Hillsborough, McClain. Maybe even Washington Courthouse. We'll see how they compare to those teams once they reach those. Only half the season is league play for the FAC because you only play only 5 league games, only 6 teams in the FAC. So not as long of a league schedule as you have in other leagues like the SOC and MSL and SVC. But yeah, we'll see how Chile fares against some other FAC schools here in the second half.
This name might be out of your range. It's because you definitely weren't born when he played at Ohio State. But Westville North's coach is Stanley Jackson, former Ohio State quarterback, technically won the Rose Bowl as a starter in 1996 as they did the two quarterback system.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and he started and never finished. But he was the starting quarterback for the Buckeyes then. He took over at Westville North this year, and they're having their best start in years, and that's
one of the teams
Chillicothe had to face them after having really competitive games the last few years. But
and playing London as well. I mean, their non-conference schedule is pretty tough, and it's been like that for a while. So unless Chillicothe has just an absolutely outstanding team, probably not going to get out of the non-league unscathed. I mean, some years, like last year, picked up a win over London. Now you lose to them in the playoffs, but in the regular season when you're playing for seedings, you pick up a win. I'm assuming they played Logan last year and probably beat him pretty decisively.
It was actually closer than you would have thought.
Really?
Just because, for some reason, that game's always close, even if Logan's down, which they have been for the last few years. But that's a proud program, and that's this is a really interesting game there on Friday night. It was a good win for the Cavaliers. Moving on to maybe the wildest game of Friday, at least, because Saturday's game was pretty wild, was the Southern Tornadoes.
Racine?
Racine. Yeah. Swirled their way into Beaver and
swirled out
with a loss. Yeah. They came in 1-3 and Eastern came in 4-0, but it was Eastern won 50-49.
Yeah.
Just an absolutely crazy game. Landon Rhinesmith for the Eagles started off with a touchdown run to put them up 7-0 on their first possession. And then after that, they were down 22-7 after the first quarter. At the half, Eastern was winning 28-22. Just a crazy game all the way around.
Wanted the over.
Yes, took the over big time. Southern took a lead with 2:27 left to play, 43-42 on a 2-point try. Eastern responded after. Now, this is one of those things where maybe this is you get what you pay for, or you have to go on the road. But in the game story I read about it, there was just repeated 15-yard penalties against Southern. So I don't know. And one of them set up this last drive where Eastern went less than a minute to score to take the lead. A 17-yard touchdown pass from Dylan Morton to freshman Boston Webb with 1:31 to play. Morton had converted the extra point on the 2-point run, which could have been a huge play in retrospect on how the game ended, because just over a minute later, Southern went down and their Carson Reuter scored his third touchdown of the game with 19.8 seconds left, but the 2-point try was no good. Eastern would move on to 5-0, 50-49. Just, it seemed like the teams could make their 2-point conversions and then just decided, you know what, we're just going to go. Or they could make their PATs, but then they decided, we're going for 2, especially late in the game. I kind of jokingly said before we got on here, guess what happened when Eastern scored? They went for 2, and guess what? Or when Southern scored, went for 2 and didn't get it, because that's what Dewey saw in week 1 was.
Week 1 and week 2.
Yeah.
It was a bad start to the year.
Yeah, teams going for 2 for all willy-nilly and going for 2. Dylan Morton threw for 4 touchdown passes and had a touchdown run in the game. Ryan Smith finished with 2 scores, 129 yards rushing. Tegan Warner pulled in 6 catches for 118 yards and 2 scores. And then Jace White had a touchdown catch and an interception for the Eagles. They move on to 5-0 on the year. I would venture a guess that it's their best start ever. I can't imagine that they've had a better start. 5-0. They travel to East next week, who's 2-2, but has lost 2 games, I believe 1 possession games each. So, they want to build off of what they've done so far and get to 7-0 when they go to Notre Dame in week 8. So that's
to Notre Dame, another game in the historic
Spartan Stadium.
Oh,
yeah. Home of the Portsmouth Spartans.
See that was like I got like really confused because like you're playing at Spartan Municipal Stadium, Portsmouth Trojans are right over here,
Yeah.
Portsmouth Spartans, Notre Dame Titans. There were like a ton of names going through my head. I never messed it up. I got a little bit distracted there because I'm pretty sure Nick Chubb just tore his ACL. But
Oh, that's not great.
I got a notification and it was like Joe Buck saying the replay won't be shown on TV, and I saw it and it didn't look good. So, we'll see if Kareem Hunt and the Browns have a little reunion or if it's just Jerome Ford season. But
Yeah, I'm sorry.
yeah, it's a little depressing, but it's all right.
Hey, well, if it makes you feel any better, some people are going to get more depressed seeing this on Thursday.
Yeah, they're gonna get. Yeah, you guys, you're gonna get reminded about it, but man, that's unfortunate. But
Yeah.
we'll carry on. Show must go on. I reckon we won't let Nick Chubb's ACL-less knee affect our show here on Thursday. But the game we were going to touch on earlier, but decided to move it to our last game of last week was West at Waverly. And get a little Don's drink.
McDonald's. Delicious.
West and Waverly both came in undefeated in the SOC2. For West, they were 3-1 overall. Waverly was 3-1. West that week 1. Actually, for both teams, week 1 losses to pretty good teams. I mean, for West, it was a last-second loss to Fairland. Waverly, a failed 2-point attempt against Miami Trace. In the game, West takes it 24-21. They remain undefeated, extend their winning streak to 2 over Waverly. It was actually their 3rd consecutive season playing at Waverly in that matchup.
3rd straight?
So I think something happened in the COVID year, maybe.
Oh, okay.
And then I think whatever happened last year happened, and then I think they were using this year, just from based on what I read, they were using this year as a way to get back on track to the normal schedule. Plus, I think
because
if
you don't want to have an unbalanced home schedule.
well, I think if they would have played at West this year, next year they would have only had 4 home games.
Yeah.
So they're just doing that to, like you said, balance it out 5-5 for next year. But
Because there's a lot of money that goes into high school sports,
especially when you're. I mean, if you were going to benefit in a way, you'd have 6 home games. They'd probably be okay with that. But if you're only going to have 4, then it's
the benefit of the 6, is great for the 1 year. But then if you go down to 4
the next year,
then it's a kick in the knee,
right?
kind of.
But in the game for West, what a game it was. Cole Tipton, and we previewed this last week with Brock on, anytime we've talked about West, not going to throw the ball a lot, not nearly as much as last year, but, when they do, it's usually effective because, you're not really expecting it. Cole Tipton, 3 of 9 for 32 yards, did throw for a touchdown, had 12 carries for 64 yards and a score. Mason Parker, I almost wanted to say held in check to like his standards usually, but still 22 carries for 90 yards. I think he had a couple 4th down conversions throughout the game. So still a big night for him. And then, we'll touch on this player a little bit later, but Jeffrey Bishop, 3 catches for 32 yards and a touchdown, 88-yard kick return for a score. It was actually funny because West was leading 10-7 at halftime, and their offense hadn't. I mean, you can count the field goal as offense, but their special teams had really been why they had 10 points because you had Holbrook with, I think it was a 31-yard field goal, and then the 88-yard kickoff return, and then the PAT by Holbrook, but the return by Bishop. Along with that on defense, Bishop had 4 interceptions and 1 fumble recovery. Were all 5 of those in the second half?
Yes.
4 interceptions and 1 fumble recovery just in the last 2 quarters. So just
all 6 of the turnovers for Waverly were in the second half.
right. So just defensively, we've talked about how for West defensively it was pretty similar to last year. You lose Sissel, who led the team in total tackles, but like overall, this West team is, I think, a lot better than a lot of people thought they would be after losing a guy like Sissel and even Trent Irwin. So or not Trenton Irwin, Michael Irwin. Trenton Irwin was the long-haired dude on the Bengals last year. But yeah, you lose Irwin and you lose Sissel, but they've still done well. They're still undefeated in the SOC too. They'll head to Minford, they'll stay home and host Minford here in week 6. For Waverly, they dropped their first league game. They're now 3-2 overall. They're at Oak Hill this week. We'll see what happens with that game. As some things are going on with Oak Hill. Not sure if they're going to finish out the season or not. We thought maybe they'll finish this game since it's a home game, but after that, we're not totally sure what's going to happen. But Mason Kelly, 20 of 37, 242 yards, 2 touchdowns. Did have the 4 interceptions, the one to end the game, and the back right corner of the end zone. West is a tough team. We've talked a lot about how this defense was, so it was never going to be easy for the Tigers. Jace Hurd, pretty productive on the ground, 27 carries for 128 yards, had a touchdown that I think cut it to 3. I think that was their last time scoring. And then Cody Swartz, 10 catches for 144 yards and 2 touchdowns. His, I don't know any Waverly records, but I'd have to say he's having a pretty historic season throughout the first half of the season here at Waverly.
They've had some great passing. And the one thing I will say is it seems like in the past it was multiple guys. It seems like it's very Cody Swords heavy on especially the big plays. Yeah. Because, you've got
Sparks, Pollard, even we hadn't seen Tanner Nichols really throughout the first couple times, but this week, or I should say this past week, I think he had 3 catches for 40, something like that. A couple third down conversions.
I think they were all third down conversions, and so it's a good offense with Waverly. It was just one player stepped up and made the bigger plays down the stretch for West, which we'll talk about here in just a moment.
Yeah, some impact players from the previous week. We were just talking about him. John, go ahead and take it away with Jeffrey Bishop.
Man, this dude, you saw him on, they kind of ran one of the jet sweeps to him early, and he didn't really get much, but you kind of just see, he made 2 or 3 spin moves to make guys miss and probably picked up, the hardest 6 yards you've ever seen. Yeah. But it wasn't until Waverly took their only lead of the game at 7-3 on the ensuing kickoff. He goes 88 yards, and in my head, I thought he had picked the wrong lane. From my view on top of the scoreboard was he could have gone
on top of the scoreboard.
Yeah, or on top of the press box. Yeah.
There you go.
He could have gone left, but instead he went straight up the middle. Either way, it didn't matter. It was such a well blocked play, but he also found the seam and flew to an 88-yard kickoff return to give them, their last lead of the game, 10-7. As they they extended it. Waverly would come back. They would extend it.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah.
But in the third quarter, he had a nice interception on the sideline. They didn't get anything out of it. I think they might have fumbled on the next play. It was a really quick turnaround.
There had to have.
It was.
What was there? 8 turnovers total.
Yeah. And it was all in the second half.
Yeah, the second half got wild.
Yeah, second half was real wild. That's one you need to go back and watch, especially the second half of that game because it was wild. Then I think it was the next play. He just made an unbelievable interception on the sideline, got both feet down. He had no business catching it, and he was making plays the whole night. Then I think it was 2 plays later was when he scored on the corner route. Really nicely thrown ball from Cole Tipton, although I think he was open on the slant, but he was even more open on the corner. That got him to his 32 yards and a score. And then in the fourth, he actually got burnt by Cody Swords on a couple straight plays, one for a touchdown. The next time he broke it up, but it was pass interference, and he didn't argue at all. But this is where, when student sections start, sometimes things go wrong for you, because the Waverly student section started chanting at him, and it just
did they?
Yeah, they started chanting at him after the pass interference, and he kind of he was just shaking his head all right, let's go. And I had said to Kenneth, hey, our all-star
dude,
camera guy.
Kenny does a great job.
Yeah.
I didn't like. Obviously, I don't pay attention while we're doing the game, but like when I go back and watch the games, like he does a great job.
Yeah. So I said something to him and was like, he's going to get another interception. Now he didn't on the next play because the next play was that run from Jace Hurd, but the next possession, Waverly ran a similar play that they had ran to burn Bishop twice, and he jumped the route, beat him to it, made a great play. They ended up still they were not able to get a first down. So after they punted, Waverly starts driving, and then of course Bishop, which I overheard from someone, throw the ball to the other side after Bishop picked off the pass for his fourth interception, and they were able to take one knee and get out of town with a win. And Jeffrey Bishop, 4 interceptions, a touchdown reception, and a kickoff return for a touchdown. I told Derek Webb, if he's not our SOC athlete of the week, I'm going to fight everyone in the office, including you, Dewey, even though you agree with me on this one.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
That
What a
was
performance.
one of the best defensive performances I've ever seen from one player. And they're all big. It wasn't like any of them were just like a Hail Mary that, didn't really like, it would have mattered if they caught it. But no, all of them were competitive plays. And he just went out and it was outstanding.
Keeping it in the SOC2 Northwest and Minford, Jeff Pica, 13 carries for 197 yards, 5 touchdowns for the senior. And that 63-21 win over Northwest. Minford now 3-1, 1-0. Now, you might think that I said that wrong, but they did miss their, I think it was week 4 game against Oak Hill as they didn't play. So another big matchup coming up this week. That was one that we previewed a little bit, and I think it was a little bit closer in the first half than Minford. Obviously when you have somebody go for 197 and 5 touchdowns, you're going to start to pull away. I know Cotto also had, I think it was like 190, or he had like 150 something and 3 touchdowns on like 6 carries. So both of them had great nights on the ground. Big test coming up this week at the Rock. So we'll see how Pica and the Falcons do. Potentially our live stream of the week. Not 100% sure yet. I'm pretty sure it will be, but we'll see. Should be a good game. Both teams will be unbeaten in the SOC2. So somebody's got to leave the Rock with a loss in the league. We'll see who it is. Yeah,
and if it's going to be our live stream, you'll probably have already seen that headline by the time we get to that. So yeah, Pica is you could just tell in basketball that he's a monster, and doesn't surprise that he would go off for a crazy night like that. Nope. Staying at the running back position, go with Nate Dreitzler from Adena. The junior had 27 rushes for 251 yards and 5 touchdowns in their 44-31 win over Adena in week 5. It was a game that our Jacob Wise caused.
It's getting late.
Yeah. Our Jacob Wise called, and he just talked about how great of a game it was, what Dreitzler did. And then also Gage Cheadle from Southeastern had 13 catches for 177 yards and ended up having 280 yards of all-purpose yardage in the game. So, I mean, that was a big-time matchup between Dreitzler and Cheadle. And, both teams are 1-4, but it feels like they're better, like they're in better position than they were a year ago. Maybe not Adena just because the amount of points they're giving up, but offensively they've been so dynamic that they've been very competitive in games that maybe you didn't think they would be, as they're still pretty young. They play a sophomore quarterback, Lucas King, and then like I mentioned with Dreitzler, he's only a junior. So Adena, I don't know if they can knock off like one of the big guns in the SVC, but they are a team that the more they get out there with the new coach, this is their 4th coach in 4 seasons. So that's
right. I mean, it's going to be tough when you're not, I would guess to a degree, they're probably still running similar stuff with similar guys, but it's still going to be, when you're changing personnel that often, it's going to be tough.
Yeah. And they've got a couple.
Dreitzler has literally had 3 coaches all 3 years
Yeah.
of his high school
And
career.
he was over 1,000 yards as a freshman. I think he was a little short last year, but he's well on his way to 1,000 yards again this year as a junior. Last year was a little bit, I think, kind of maybe the most hectic year because they had a late change, and then that change did not work out. But, it seems like they're moving a little bit in the right direction. Now, the next 2 weeks, they got Paint Valley and Unioto coming into Frankfurt, so it's going to be a little tougher. But, I could see him having big weeks in a couple of those games just because he's the type of player that can really go off for you and carry you to a win. But they've got a couple more winnable games down the road. Like I mentioned with Southeastern, with Gage Cheadle. Look for him this week because they got Westfall at Westfall.
That could be a shootout.
Westfall's not big on defense either. Southeastern, with Joey Pfeiffer playing quarterback, they've really seemed like they figured out some stuff for Coach Blair, and it seems like they're in the right direction because they're very young because Cheadle's only a sophomore. So that could be a score to watch for sure, as both those teams could really put up some points.
So our fourth and final impact player of this week, we'll keep it at the running back position. Take it down to the OVC. Kaden Murphy with the Coalgrove Hornets, I believe, is their mascot for the win against Chesapeake. It was, I think it was 44 to 30.
Yes.
Murphy had 26 carries for 145 yards, 2 touchdowns, 62 receiving yards, and a score. Now, I do believe overall, and I should have probably written the whole backfield down, I think Coalgrove had like over 300 rushing yards, so definitely a ground and pound offense at whatever Dawson Bryant, Coalgrove. I wonder what like they prefer it. I know we usually use Coalgrove, but like Max Preps has it as Dawson Bryant. I know Dawson Bryant is the school and Coalgrove is the city or town or whatever.
Yeah, so like I think it's kind of like New Boston with Glenwood.
I've never called them Glenwood.
Right. So I think it's officially Glenwood, but for a long time. So like there was a year where at the Convo they played the girls district finals in basketball all day one week, and then the next week they played the boys like they normally do. And New Boston made it in boys and was New Boston. The girls were Glenwood. So I legitimately for a little bit thought they were 2 different schools. So, but
yeah, I've never. I mean, I don't talk New Boston a whole lot because they don't have football.
They don't have football.
It's like I know they had a decent
football.
Football.
Yeah.
I know boys basketball. They had a decent run a few years.
Yeah, they made
back,
the state a couple years ago.
Other than that, I don't talk New Boston a whole lot. There's a ton of schools down in that area that
you need to see New Boston school. It's beautiful.
Yeah. I can't tell if you're being sarcastic.
No, I'm dead serious. They used to have they used to have 2 levels, and on the steps to go up to the top level, a step was in play. So anything over that is much better. But the new school it really is beautiful. It's they only have 1 level of seating, but I mean it's one of the smaller schools in the state, so it makes sense. But I went down there last year for a girls' game, and I was very impressed with the school.
All right, so some game previews for the upcoming week. I'll start things off, and then John will save our potential live stream game of the week for last, as you'll take that one. But to start things off, Miami Trace takes on McClain in the first round of the FAC play. For Miami Trace, 3-2, currently on a 2-game winning streak. They started their year off with a win at Waverly and then had dropped consecutive games against Wilmington and a really good Logan Elm team. Since then, wins over Bethel Tate and Western Brown. Look for signal caller Trey Robinette, Garrett Guess on the outside, Gage Stuckey as well, and then Asher LeBeau and Julian Baker in the backfield. LeBeau, one of your guys that, before the season you said to look out for this Miami Trace team, and we've only seen them in week 1, but just looking at box scores, that's really panned out for the Panthers. Then for McClain, we've only seen them 1 time as well. It was the 14-13 win at Northwest in week 2.
Because no one can get a 2-point conversion with less than a minute left.
Man, that was a tough way to start the season. But for McClain, 4-1, only lost to Paint Valley in the Battle of 41 or whatever the trophy said. I can't exactly. I'm not good with roads and stuff like that, so I couldn't.
Roads.
Yeah, roads. I'm not good with that, but I think it was the Battle of 41. It's always cool when high school teams have trophy games. I think that should be, because like you just look at the Big Ten, for example. I think Michigan and Minnesota play for like the Little Brown Jug or something, and then Minnesota and Nebraska play for Paul Bunyan's Axe or the Illabuck with Ohio State and Illinois.
Oh, you're missing the best one. Iowa and Minnesota played for Florida Rosedale. It's a plastic pig.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Minnesota has a ton of them.
Yeah,
it
they
seems
do.
Like
because they were the best school for a long time. So I think people were like, "Oh, we're not going to beat them, so let's hype it up by throwing out Paul Bunyan's axe, or a jug, yeah."
But yeah, for McClain, 4-1, only lost to Paint Valley. It was 29-15. Nothing to hang your head about. Paint Valley, a team that I think we both have in our top 10 currently as of week 5. Drake Stapleton, a very capable quarterback. We've seen him make throws when he has to, but when you have guys like Andrew Potts and Keaton Pinwell in the backfield, you're not going to have to air it out a whole lot. And most of the times when you do, it's to one of those two guys. I mean, Potts, we've kind of dubbed more of a ground and pound type of guy, but I mean, I think in that Northwest game alone, he had like 4 or 5 catches for probably 40 or 50 yards. I can't remember the exact box score. And then Pinwell, more of that H-back type guy that you would traditionally see, taking sweeps to the outside or catching passes in space. But, two versatile players, should be a good matchup. I'm pretty interested, and we'll talk a little bit FAC later once it's my turn again, but all of these FAC teams, and I almost said outside of Jackson, but really even Jackson, I'm interested to see how they compare against each other here in the second half.
Yeah, it's a league that, is typically strong, but like we don't really know so much about them as like it feels like we normally do, especially with like Chillicothe having some players leave and having a big graduating class last year. And then when they play their first 4 weeks, it's not like you can really find anything out. And then like Miami Trace seems kind of up and down on
after week 1, I was like high as a kite on them. And then, you drop the Wilmington game.
It's not like Wilmington's bad. They're 4-1.
Right. And then like the Logan Elm game is because I know Logan Elm is really good, but what was it, 41-20?
Yeah.
That was a lot larger than I thought. I mean, I think I picked Miami Trace in that game, so that one kind of surprised me. Then that definitely didn't lower my expectations or thoughts of Miami Trace, but that definitely elevated my thoughts of Logan Elm. They're on a 2-game win streak heading into league play, so maybe they've turned it around and found their footing a little bit after dropping 2 straight weeks 2 and 3. So, for a lot of teams, league play is what matters the most. So we'll see if they can get it going here.
Yeah, so that's going to be a big game. And speaking of league play and big games, we got Piketon at Unioto.
Yep.
Piketon coming in at 4-1, Unioto at 4-1, Unioto 2-0 in league play, and Piketon at 1-1. They have played very different schedules so far.
Yes.
And that's where, like, on Fantastic 50, it kind of shows, like, in the projected score. Right now, it says Unioto by 19, but I can't see that. I just think...
I don't know. I mean, if you're going to... Like, I would assume when they're doing that, it's probably a lot of computer stuff.
Yeah.
And I would guess, like, the Zane Trace game played a large role in that, so...
well, it just so happens, like, where the teams they beat are not very good.
Well, that as well, and...
But
I don't know.
I just think with, Luke Gallian does a really good job running the show for them. He had a couple picks against Zane Trace. One was deflected at the line. The other one, I think, was just maybe a little overthrow. But he does a good job running their offense. They've got some really nice pieces. It's going to be weird. Like, maybe he looks at Mason Thacker a little too much. I know he had 12 catches for like 130 yards, but it seemed like that was the first and only route a few times on a couple of those. So maybe if they can find a way to get like a Cade Conley involved a little bit more, because I know his name was set as attempted to, but Brent McGuire is another kid that does a good job of getting the ball in space and making stuff happen. I mean, Thacker is dynamic for sure.
Well, I think a lot of the stuff to Thacker was more like
extended handoffs, kind of.
Well, that and right, like I think the air yards on a lot of his stuff was like less than 8 yards, and it's just a lot of yak and that kind of stuff. But And that's definitely a lot safer because like it seemed like McGuire's more of the vertical guy. It's a lot safer to dump it off to somebody short than throw it up deep. But also when you have McGuire, who's like 6'3" or 6'2", he's a lot bigger than the dude's guarding him.
Yes.
We'll put it that way. Throwing it up to a guy that's 6'2" plus to a DB that's being guarded by a DB that's like 5'10", it's not as dangerous as the typical 50-50 ball, but. Yeah, a lot of weapons.
I'm interested to see how Unioto guards that, because you would think you would want maybe an Ashton Crace on McGuire.
A little taller, a little bit of height.
I don't know how well you've seen like Unioto's film. Ashton Crace is like ridiculous in space tackling. Mm-hmm. It's probably because he's so long and athletic, but like for a kid that weighs like 84 pounds. Sorry, Ashton. For a kid that weighs like 100, maybe 150 pounds, like if he gets his hands on you, you're not going anywhere. Mm-hmm. Like he does such a really good job of tackling in space. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was the one kind of shadowing Thacker in a way, right. Or if they just look to zone him a little bit. That's where Unioto has kind of been susceptible a little bit when they're dropping their linebackers in coverage. Waverly did a good job of exposing that. I know that Vinton County did it once or twice in week 1 as well, and Westfall did a couple times in week 4. So that's going to be a big thing for Unioto to look for defensively. Buddy Wilson also at the running back position. He's another kid that can really run for Piketon, does a really good job. He's hard to bring down. Maybe my only advice for him is to a little more north-south than east-west, because I know he had that 12-yard run that he ran about 130 yards on the other day.
Reversed the field twice, left, right, back to left, maybe back to the right again. I don't know. It was a little pinball machine action.
Yeah, it was awesome. But then you realize, he didn't get the first down on the play. It was a dynamic play, and he's the type of kid that can, if he gets in the open field, you're not catching him.
Right.
So that's something Unioto with their young DBs or young safeties have to really watch for. But with Unioto up front, I like their ability to stop the run, because you've got Marcel James, Shannon Newell in at the defensive tackles, DNs, KB Perkins and Will Fleck do a really good job. They're both long. I look for them to try to, if they get held up, to just get their arms up in the air to try to deflect a lot of those screen passes at the line. For Unioto, obviously the offense is mostly predicated in the air, but Newton Hoops does a really good job of finding his open men. I believe he's thrown 11 touchdowns, 2 interceptions on the year. He's their all-time leader in literally every passing category. For good reason. He does a good job of finding guys, and they've got guys that can make plays. They have 5 different receivers that have a touchdown reception of over 60 yards this year.
Oh, okay.
And Blake had a non-touchdown reception of 56 the other day. So they've had 6 different guys with a reception over 60 or 50 yards on the year. So it's.
I remember Shane saying, I think in one quarter they had like 4 different guys catch a touchdown pass, which it's always cool to see like that kind of usage amongst your entire like skilled groups.
Yeah, and Kaden Cartwright's had a pick 6 in each of the last 2 weeks for them. He's had 8 total touchdowns, 6 through the air, and the 2 pick 6s.
2 through the air the other way.
Yes. So he's been their main big play receiver. I think he still leads them in receptions. Blake Hoops is close on that. He's more of the short passing and make things happen kind of guy. KB Perkins had his first catch since week 1 for a touchdown, as he was mostly focused on the defensive side. But if they can get him involved in the offense, you've seen him in basketball and baseball. He does a really good job for them. I think Unioto's got too many weapons, because that's not even mentioned like a Cody Braden, who's had some really big scores for him this year. Ty Woods has caught some passes for him. Connor Dollison's done a really good job running the ball for them as a senior. It's a game that I think Unioto is favored. I don't think the 19 points.
That's a little much.
Yeah, I would take Piketon on that with the points, but I would think it's closer to a 2-score game. Wouldn't be surprised if it's close going into the 4th, because Piketon can really put up points. And, coming off a week where maybe they're humbled a little bit. They're going to, go back to the drawing board a little bit. And, it wouldn't surprise me if this is a tight game throughout. I do think that for Piketon this week or next week, one of those two, they have Paint Valley at home in week 7. One of those two is a must win for them to get in the playoffs. If not, at 7 wins, they're going to be on the bubble. And, 8 wins with one over Paint Valley or Unioto, they may have a home game. Like
it's either a home game or nothing.
Yeah. It's going to be one of those seasons where that non-league schedule, like Valley is a team that you never expect to not win.
Right.
Right now they don't have any wins. So,
if them and Oak Hill managed to play, I would think Valley would probably pick up a win there. But
so you'll see. Eventually they'll get a little extra help with that, but they have a really tough 3-week schedule, and this one's gonna be tough here at Unioto. I believe it's homecoming night also. So whatever that means.
I don't know.
I don't know if that means anything anymore. I was talking to my mom about do you remember when we used to make homecoming floats and you never did that, did you?
I mean, they would usually have people drive around in nice cars or Jeeps, because those are really
open
cool now.
Yeah. But I know when I first started high school, they were building floats, and I don't know why they stopped. And then I thought, when I was a freshman, they asked for people to help with the floats. I was like, I'm not doing that. I'm why they stopped doing it. It's because there was lazies. And then by the time I was a senior, I know they had the convertibles and stuff.
Yeah. All right, headed back to the FAC, one of the other 3 FAC League opening matchups here in Week 6, Jackson and Washington Courthouse. For Jackson, they are currently 4-1. The only loss for the Ironmen through the first half of the season was to Ironton, so definitely nothing to hang your head about there. Ironton, probably the best team in our coverage area. Mm-hmm. They've taken down pretty much every team they've played, although I think that's Ironton, that's Jackson, Wheelersburg, Fairland, and then whoever they play, and then South Point.
Yeah.
Look for both of the Wolfords, Cade Wolford, Bodie Wolford, 2 dynamic players, especially the former, as we've seen him go. I think last week he had 450 total yards or something ridiculous and 5 touchdowns. Bodie Wolford transferring over to quarterback this season. One common opponent for these 2 teams in Western Brown. The only reason I think this game could maybe be a little closer than people are expecting, because Courthouse, they lost a lot to graduation and, just some other losses they've had this year. I think people maybe thinking Jackson picks up a win a little larger, but I don't, and you can look it up right now if you don't mind, the spread for that game.
Oh, let me look. Did you mention the 34-7 fourth quarter?
I have not yet, but Courthouse 3-2, losses to London and Monroe. The quarter John's talking about was, I think it was the fourth quarter. Monroe beat Courthouse 34-7, which is insane. They were winning heading into the fourth
they were
quarter.
winning with 6 minutes left, and then I think it was a pick 6 and then a fumble return for a touchdown, and then I think they just scored normally.
Yeah, so definitely a tough turn of events for Courthouse down the stretch. But, Gavin Kaufman, 7 touchdowns, 7 interceptions through, I think those were only through the first 3 or 4 weeks, so nothing up to date to week 5. But, just looking at those, obviously want to bring down the interceptions a little bit, and you definitely don't want to just hand possessions over to a team like Jackson, as most likely they'll make you pay. Rocky Jones, another one of those guys that's just about as dynamic as it gets, leads the team in rushing, second in receiving. Mason Kaufman and Isaiah Haithcock both with double-digit receptions on the season. Now back to the Western Brown deal. Jackson winning 56-48. Courthouse winning 39-20. So, I usually like to use common opponents as kind of a way to determine who I think could potentially win. Now, I still think Ironton wins this game.
You mean Jackson?
Or sorry,
the Iron Men.
I still think Jackson wins this game, despite the fact that Courthouse with a larger win over Western Brown. I think Brock said that in the game against Courthouse, Western Brown was dealing with some key injuries, so that, if true, most likely played a pretty large role in that type of margin. It should be a good game, a good way for us to kind of analyze where all the FAC schools are at. As previously mentioned, outside of, we think maybe Chillicothe's a little out of it, although, we could see them compete with McClain or with Hillsborough, so we'll see where they stand with each other. And then Miami, Trace McClain play Jackson and Courthouse. I think it'll be a great way to gauge kind of where everybody is in comparison with one another, because the spread of that game is
20. Which is crazy for being at Courthouse.
Oh, it's at Courthouse. If I had to put a spread on that game, just based on what's happened this year, I would probably put it at they don't do halves, do they? They just do full points.
Yeah.
I would put it at 15. So I would either make you pick a 2 or less score game or a 3+ game. So I would probably put it at 15, I would say. I don't know. Jackson they put up a ton of points. I probably should have written down their average points per game, but I know it's ridiculous. I mean, outside of only scoring what was it against Ironton? They only scored 7 points, didn't they?
Against Ironton, they lost 35-14.
35-14.
So they've scored 22, 14, 28, 56, and 44.
Okay, so not as high as I thought. A little high more recently than the first few weeks of the season.
But, I mean, the 28 against Wheelersburg is pretty darn good.
Right. I think this game will be a lot closer than people expect. However, I still think Jackson takes it and advances to 1-0 on the season in the FAC, but definitely wouldn't surprise me if Courthouse somehow stuns them here and takes a win in Week 6 over Jackson.
I think it'll be a little more interesting game than, what the Sharps are saying.
Yeah.
Or the computers, whatever.
Sharps.
Yeah, it's the Vegas. Just don't worry about it.
I don't have anything to worry about. I have no clue what.
Yeah, that's what they call the gambling
Sharks.
Sharps.
Like Shannon Sharp.
Yeah, without an E.
Right. Yeah, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, it just means you're good at it.
A professional gambler or a professional sports bettor is a sharp.
Yeah.
So you're a sharp.
I was in week 1 of the college football season, but not so much in week 3, as I was not able to play in week 2. Texas.
Is it illegal in
Oh,
Texas? Yeah. It doesn't matter. Can't you still just use your...
Yeah, but you got to be
So does it take your IP where you currently are?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Yeah, it's probably better, though, after what week 3 was. I mean, I was 500, but still never... 500's a loss.
I mean, it could be a win. Just depends how much you put on the bets you won and lost.
I try to keep the same.
Okay. So
that way I don't do something real dumb. I mean, it's not like I bet a lot anyway. It's just
playing with house money.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
So I still, it's $5-10 a game, depending. Although your boy Coach Prime ruined me. Because I put a tenner on them to cover.
That was an 18, 19 point spread, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was not close to that.
Well, I just turned 21, so I guess I'll
there you go.
Start to get in on it now.
Yeah.
I know a lot of I guess I shouldn't just spread illegal stuff. Some of my friends use their older parents, Social Security stuff and whatnot. But
yeah, well, you're 21, so you can legally do it.
I don't know.
Happy birthday, Dewey.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was last week, but
Saturday. Yeah. I don't know. I've just it's entertaining to me, but I don't know. I just didn't I'll probably get into it a little bit now just because it's a little bit less of a hassle than asking my dad for his Social Security number.
Yeah.
But I just didn't really care enough to go through all the extra hassle. Plus, I mean, it was legalized to start this year. So I really only had to wait, 9 months to get here. So it wasn't that big a deal.
And really, when we were kind of joking that I'm playing with house money, it's because all these places offer you free.
Well, yeah, you throw down some of them. You put in $5 and here's $200.
Yeah, and then all you got to do is just take out your $5 and
right.
Yeah,
and, I mean, if you just continuously win a little bit back, then you're always just playing with. I know you said you leave 5 or 10 in there,
yeah,
wherever
just to
it's
keep
at.
playing, but yeah, but yeah, don't bet on high school sports. I know it's McNeil, the reflog or whatever his name is on Twitter. He puts out high school betting lines and
oh really?
Yeah, but they're always I think they're jokes, but they're almost always off of using those computer sites in a way. But those are only big time schools also.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's the Pickertons and stuff.
Yeah. Nothing probably trickles down into
like
our area.
Like let's say Pickerington Central against Gahanna Lincoln last week. You would have thought that would have been a close game, right? Because Pickerington Central's got all these big time recruits, but they got absolutely annihilated by Gahanna Lincoln. So I bet some people would have lost their shirts on that. Yeah. So, and moving on to our last game, we go to Gallia at Fairland. Big matchup. The Dragons are 4-1 overall. Obviously, the loss, very lopsided loss to Ironton in week 3, 62-14. But other than that, they have just put it on teams. Now a 32-29 win with Peyton Jackson having that last second touchdown in week 1 to beat West. Other than that, a 56-21 win over Wellston, a 61-27 win over Trimble, and then a 40-7 win over Rock Hill. It's just they've just really put it on teams. They're scoring a ton of points, but this Gallia Academy team, 39-0, 30-0. So 2 shutouts to start the season, 42-12 over Point Pleasant, and then a 47-21 win over Chesapeake and a 50-18 win over Portsmouth. So even though they've given up some points in the last 2 weeks, they've scored a ton of points, and they've done that, with some new players. Braylon Rathburn at quarterback, he threw for 5 touchdowns against Portsmouth the other day. They had 30 points in the first quarter, just an absolute blowout from the get-go. Kenyon Franklin had a really big game for them receiving-wise. The Shamblins, Hudson, and I believe Hunter. Yeah. They both can really do a lot of things super fast. Like, that's such an athletic team. And, they've done it really impressively. They haven't played the best schedule yet. As Meigs, Athens, Point Pleasant all combined 3 wins. So, I mean, that part, but they have taken care of business in all 5 weeks. So it'll be a big time test for Fairland to score against that the defense of Gallia. But then I mentioned the speed that Gallia also brings. This can be a really high scoring game on Fantastic 50. They've got it as a 2-point game.
Okay.
Yeah.
Probably
so,
in favor of Gallia, I would assume. Yeah.
Especially now it's at Fairland.
Right. So it's at Gallia, that'd probably be where we'd be heading this week.
So because Fairland has their own stream, we're still trying to figure out some stuff there. But that is probably the game of the week.
I would agree so.
Yeah, those two are they both can put up some points. I don't know if Fairland's defense is as good. They obviously gave up a lot to Ironton, but a 40-7 win over Rock Hill, who's been playing pretty decent ball. Last week was pretty impressive. But with Peyton Jackson at quarterback, he's been very efficient so far this year. He's got Bryson Hunt as a receiver, close to 200 yards through the first couple of weeks of the season. Just can really make a lot of things happen for them. Running the ball, Jack Hayden, is along with Peyton Jackson running out of the backfield. It's a dynamic team that can do a lot of different things. Hayden scored a lot of touchdowns for them. Almost scored a lot of scores.
A lot of scores.
Yes, I think it's going to be a big scoring game. I think it's going to be really fun. It's going to be worth the price of admission for sure. And I'm going to say for sure we will have someone there.
Probably Tyler.
Yep, Tyler and Bailey is right now on our schedule. So we'll kind of see from there if we're going to have the stream or not. But I think if not, just definitely check out our...
it would probably be posted. Our official announcement will probably be posted probably today. It's probably Thursday.
Yeah, so should be a really good game no matter what. So
now the OVC, once we start to get into league play, I'm going to exclude Ironton because, outside of maybe Gallia and maybe... they already played Fairland. I would say probably besides Gallia, they're probably going to walk pretty easily through the OVC. Yeah. But, once, Gallia, Fairland, South Point, Colgrove, once all these teams start playing each other, it's going to get pretty interesting because, a lot of these teams have been impressive. A lot of them undefeated in league play or, get out of there with 1 loss. Colgrove and Chesapeake playing last week. I think that was kind of one of the initial, relatively big games in the OVC. So, as things start to heat up down south, we'll see how that goes. And then we'll quickly touch, unless you had something.
No, I was just going to throw out, you mentioned South Point. I want to give them a shout out. Now, last year they went 3-7. They're 3-2 so far this year. Get ready for this. Before 2022, their win totals 1-1-1, 0-2, 0-2, 2. 2013, they won 7. Before that, they won 1-1, 2, and 1.
Wow.
So for them to have back-to-back years with 3 wins is great. Right now, I was 42-8 last week with Ironton. That's going to happen. But they beat Colgrove, Dawson Bryant, whatever, in week 4, which was scored as one of the bigger upsets in the state. Mm-hmm. They're at Rock Hill this week. They're not favored, but that one's supposed to be a 1-point game, very close game. Then they got Fairland. They will have Gallia to finish, but then they'll have Chesapeake and Portsmouth. If they can get to 5 wins, I don't even know if they would be able to make the playoffs. As of now, it says if they got to 5 wins, they'd be in. And for a team that has been as low as they have, it's pretty amazing. We don't talk about them a whole lot because, we don't really see them a lot. Right. And with the fact that they haven't had a lot of success over the last 15 years. But yeah, big shout out to the South Point for at least being on the upswing as far as their football program goes.
So
things are pointing up for the Pointers.
So we'll quickly touch on, as of now, our assumed live stream game of the week in Minford at West. Now, I didn't actually write anything down for this. I'm pretty familiar with both teams. I haven't seen Minford yet, but a lot of it is the same for them. We talked about already Jeff Pica, a force on the ground for them. Big reason why they're, I think, 4-1, or excuse me, 3-1, because they haven't played the Oak Hill. Probably would have been 4-1 and 2-0 in the league, beating Northwest last week. Peyton Cottle, a guy that has been kind of doing it on the ground all season. The first few weeks wasn't doing much through the air, but really started opening up. I think it was against Wellston. He had double his the first 3 weeks, he had less than 200 yards passing altogether. And then I think week 4 against Wellston, he had over 200 just in that game. So, we've seen them kind of do a little bit more through the air more recently. And it's going to be a little tough for them just going on the road against the currently undefeated in the league, defending champs from a season ago in Portsmouth West. Never going to be easy to play at the Rock, especially when you got guys like Mason Parker, who I think was averaging 11.8 yards per carry before the game against Waverly. I would assume he's still well over 10 yards per carry. And then, it's kind of a big 3 over there with Tipton. They don't throw a ton, but when they do, it's pretty much going to Bishop, and we've even seen Bishop get a little bit of work in jet sweep type things. Mm-hmm. Not really anything through the tackles or through the guards or anything, but a lot of stuff out in open space. And then back to Tipton a little bit. He can do it on the ground as well. As a receiver last year, so definitely about as athletic as you can ask a quarterback to be. Had a QB keeper against Waverly not last night, but 2 nights ago. I think it was 48 yards. And
big run.
I think that made it 20. I think that made it 24-10. So that was actually their final score.
Or 21-14. Or 24-14.
24-14. So that was actually their final score of the night. A lot of stuff. It's play action read stuff with Parker. So it's kind of the similar thing to Jackson and Courthouse, to where I'm pretty confident West will win, but I don't think it will be. And you would have to look up the spread. I'm assuming it's probably
it's
18
similar.
or 19, but the tough thing about West is once they get ahead, it's so hard to come back just based on the style of stuff they run, because they keep it on the ground. The clock continues to run. Parker's averaging over 10 yards a carry, so he's basically averaging a first down every time he runs the ball. And then, when you have an offense like Minford does, although they've started to air it out a little bit more recently, when you rely heavily on the ground game, that's a little tougher to play behind with. So, we'll see what happens. They'll both be undefeated in the league. It'll give us, in my opinion, a little better look as to where Minford is in comparison with the rest of the league. Because obviously, based on that game, we can compare them to, a Waverly, or just literally compare them to West as they'll be playing each other. So we'll see what happens. Should be a fun game down at the Rock. Hopefully, we're able to go down there and get that on live stream, as it would probably be the last chance to see West, unless something with the playoffs happens, and it would probably, I would assume, be our only chance to see Minford on the season. So
yeah, West after that has Valley, Northwest, Oak Hill before Wheelersburg. So, and then Wheelersburg has their own stream, which is cool.
Right.
I'm sure they do a really good job, but
gotta pay for it. But
yeah, as far as Minford goes, I mean, it was a tight game last year, 29-16. They were at home, with Pica.
That would be like a similar score, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think with the way West does things, unless they have just a ton of large scoring plays, that they're probably not going to score over 30 a lot of the time. It's probably going to be a lot of like 20 to 30 type scores for them, no matter who they're playing.
Yeah, they're going to pound the ball against you is the biggest thing. And, for Minford, it's, I don't know if it's as bad of a loss as people may have thought with Chesapeake in week 2. But, I mean, it's a 1-point game. So they're 1 point from being 4-0, and then likely 5-0 if they played Oak Hill. So they're not too far off of probably where they thought they're going to be in the preseason. I would say at this point they probably would have thought they're going to be 5-0.
Just thinking about that score, that sounds like a game where the team that went for 2 towards the end actually came away with them. So I don't
want to say it for sure.
Right. I don't know because that was week 2, wasn't it?
Week 2, yeah.
So I don't know if that's for sure what happened, but
it seems like it.
Yeah, that definitely seems like the type of game where a team scores in the last few seconds or minutes and goes for 2 and actually got it. So
yeah, it would have been the home team because it was at Chesapeake too.
Oh, was it? That place was probably rocking.
Yeah,
if that is what happened. I would find it odd if they just randomly went for 2 on their first or second score of the game,
and then Minford never went for 2 to try to catch up. Yeah.
So yeah,
that's what it seems like for sure. But yeah, so they're not very far away from possibly being undefeated. And then West has put up some big points against a Hillsborough team that they gave up 34 points to, which seems kind of crazy.
We've talked about that. Hillsborough is even in a lot of their losses, it's kind of weird how competitive they've been throughout the first half of the season. But.
Yeah, and then they scored. They beat Wellston 49-10, which is kind of what you expect in that game at this point of where the Golden Rockets are. But I feel like that Waverly score is probably a little more likely what we'll see in that 20 to 30 point range, you mentioned.
A 20 I'm assuming, they have Montgomery, so they probably can't kick field goal. Like a 24-10 type score, 28-10. Maybe not 28-10, but 1 to 2 scores, I would say, is what I would expect. But, we'll see. We never know. The Falcons could come in there and shock the conference. So.
Yeah, shock the Rock.
Yeah, shock. There we go. I tell you
we already used that in week 1, but still
did
counts.
We?
Yeah, for Fairland because they shocked the Rock.
Well, I tell you what, if we stream that game and Minford somehow pulls it off, that's going to be the first thing out of my mouth.
Yes.
The Falcons shocked the Rock.
Spoiler. Yeah.
Yeah. But so, if Minford's about to win, you already know what I'm going to say. So
you already have it in your back pocket.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So we'll quickly go through our power rankings from week 5 headed into week 6. I'll start. This is off the top of my head as all my devices have died. As we've been sitting here for about 3 hours. And
it's more than that.
We've got some poor device management on my end. But we'll keep Ironton in the 1. Logan Elm stays in the 2. The 3, Jackson. 4, actually, now I think I had Gallia. I bumped them up 1 and flipped them with Wheelersburg, who's now in my 5. Now, in my 6, I have West after the win over Waverly, over the team in 7th who actually beat them in Fairland. I know that's kind of odd to do, I think, but I've talked about it a lot. It's one 15-yard touchdown at the end of the game away from West being undefeated right now.
I could see 62 to 14 is hard to ignore. Yeah, so I get that.
So we have Fairland in the 7. In the 8, we actually have a new team. We have Colgrove, who picked up a win. It was 44 to 30 over Chesapeake this past Friday. And then in the 8 we have Waverly, in the 9 we have Waverly, and then Paint Valley still in the 10. So Paint Valley can have some big opportunities coming up a little later in the season. I know they finished the year 9-10 with Unioto and Unioto and Zane Trace. I'm guessing they play Piketon week 7 or 8.
Week 7, yeah.
So we'll get a little better look at them towards the last few weeks of the season.
Yes. So and then my power rankings are very similar. I think we don't have a different team in the top 10.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, we kind of figured it. I mean, early on, we were probably going to have a little bit of differences, but like once we get to week 10, our power rankings will probably be the exact same. And we already have the same 10 teams, just a few flips. So.
Yeah. So I had Ironton at 1. I mean, once again, until they lose again. Logan Elm at 2, as they are continuing towards that big matchup with Bloom Carroll in week 7? Yeah.
Yep, next week.
Then we got Jackson in the 3. I think they keep getting better every week. Gallia in the 4. I was the first one on Gallia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I started.
You made your way
behind.
up, so it's all right. Then I got Wheelersburg at the 5. Fairland is in my 6 just because I do have them over West for the head-to-head. I have West in the 7. I actually have Paint Valley in my 8 spot. I've been impressed with them. The loss with West Jefferson is kind of a similar one to Fairland's with Ironton, where you're just kind of outclassed that week, but they've done a good job every other week.
Well, the win over McClain was a big reason why I put them at 10 last week and had Piketon. I know we only do a top 10, but like if we did like top 15, I had Piketon in my 11, so just one spot below. So I think Paint Valley could easily be right where you have them at 8.
And then I have Cold Grove at 9. They're new to my list this week. That 4-1 start, with that loss against South Point is it. But I've been impressed with them this season, and I have Waverly at 10. There's a lot of things in that game that I thought.
Where did I have Waverly 9?
You had 9.
And Paint Valley 10. Okay.
Yeah. There's a lot of things in that game with Waverly that, to me, could either stir up, could be a sign of things to come. That they did not do well, or certain aspects of the game. But I think when they rely off of Hurd first, then go with Kelly in the passing game, I think that's when they're best. It seemed like it was kind of flipped the other way the last week. And I thought when they got behind, I thought they kind of sacrificed a little bit of who they should be. Because Mason Kelly has shown that he's definitely a capable quarterback. He just kind of got set in on his one guy in that game, and that's where Bishop was able to take advantage. But that was mostly one guy making outstanding plays. So I think Waverly's still got a really good chance to go 7-3, 8-2. Winning at Wheelersburg would be really tough, but I like their chances to still finish the season very strongly. But for me, I had 2 teams drop out, which was Piketon and Eastern Pike.
You had Eastern in your top 10 last week?
They were in my top 10. They were at number 10. But, I mean, Southern's not very good. So for them to need a stop on the 2-point conversion at the end, giving up 49 points at home. I know they've had some injuries going on, but I'm still going to keep them close because, I think they have an excellent chance to run the table. But I'm very interested to see how they do against East this week, because East is coming off a couple of losses, but they're both tough, close losses. So I think it'll be something to look for.
Well, I will say, you kind of talking about dropping Eastern out after they won a game. That's kind of how I was with Unioto. It wasn't really anything they did. It was just more like, after the Waverly game, they've had, 2 weeks where it's just kind of like there's not a lot for them to gain there. I mean, Westfall's been great offensively, and then this past week with Huntington, I mean, we know how they've been the last few years. Although a couple years ago they had probably one of the better teams they've had first.
Yeah, they had a really good offensive line, but most of those guys graduated.
Right. So there just hasn't been since the Waverly week. The past weeks 4 and 5, just not really a lot of area to show themselves off or anything. Now those weeks are starting to come up. They'll get Piketon this week, a great opportunity. I know Piketon lost to Zane Trace pretty decisively. That game was a little further apart than the final score.
The final score was a little was not as evident of what the game was.
So, they'll get Piketon this week, ZT week 8, and then Paint Valley right in week 9. So, the tougher part of the schedule, of the league schedule coming up for Unioto. And then kind of the same thing for Zane Trace. They kind of fell out of the top 10 consideration pretty early, although the win last week over Piketon is kind of, they're starting to blip up a little bit. And then, same thing for them. They'll get Unioto week 8 and then Paint Valley week 10. So chances for all the SVC schools as they start as all the I don't know, maybe like the top half of the league starts to play each other. And the more of the thing for Colgrove was I just kind of realized that, I already had Ironton, Gallia, and Fairland in there from the OVC, but I realized there's probably, like, the winner of the Chesapeake Colgrove game was probably getting put in my top 10. I think Colgrove deserves it a little bit, so I threw them up there at 8. They're 3-1, they're 4-1 overall, and then I bumped Waverly down to 9. I can't even remember if Waverly was in my top 10 last week. I think I may have had them at 7.
Yeah, something like that.
I'd have to look at the recording from last week, but yeah, I think the top 10s are pretty accurate so far. I told you before I usually tried to make like a top 15 or 20 so I could see like where I was moving people. I'm going to have to redo that because I think right now I have Eastern at like 20 because I made it in like week 1.
Right.
So I'll probably redo my top 20 this week and then get a little better. Although really probably the top 5 isn't going to change. Although Fairland and Gallia is a big game. That one could see some movement.
Yeah,
depending
that
on,
definitely could.
Well, really, no matter who wins, there's going to probably be some movement. Although it kind of depends on, like, Gallia is obviously a little higher on both of our boards than Fairland. So, if it's a tight win for Gallia, Fairland may not move a ton. Now, if Gallia were to just, win by 3 or 4 scores, then Fairland might drop off a little bit. It'd still only be their second loss, which there are some 2-loss teams in our top 10, but we'll see. It's all most of their power rankings is in terms of losses, like quality of loss and stuff like that. So yeah, we'll see what happens. League play starting to heat up, and that's when the rankings start to get shaken up a little bit.
Yeah, it should be a good week 6, and like you mentioned with St. Trace, they have opportunities to jump back into mine as they got Huntington, which I'd be shocked if it was close, and then Westfall before they got go to Unioto in week 8. So, for them, they definitely have a chance to keep moving up as they get more healthy throughout the season too. And so that's a big thing for a school like them. I still have them. I had them picked before the season as my pick to win the SVC, and I'm standing by it as of now. So even though I have Paint Valley ranked above them, it's still...
Well, yeah, right. So, right now I would probably have ZT, if I had a top 20, between Paint Valley, Unioto, ZT, and Piketon. I think most people can agree that's the top half of the league.
Yeah.
I'd probably have ZT ranked 3 out of 4, and probably Piketon at 4th, and then, obviously with the rankings that I just gave out, Paint Valley probably the top seed, and then Unioto at 2. But yeah, like really both of us have said, those teams are going to start playing each other, and we're going to hopefully they don't all just beat on each other, and then it just gets sloppy, and we got to pick between the lines a little bit there, but. League play should make things interesting here in the second half of the season. That'll just about do it on this episode of Overtime, John, unless you have anything extra you think we missed or any extra storylines we should look forward to in the upcoming week. Looks like we're going to get a pretty similar answer as we did on Tuesday.
I'm excited for week 6.
Oh, that's not what I thought we were going to get. I thought we were going to get a nope.
No, I didn't want to give it away twice. But no, it's... Pray for me as a Cubs fan for this week.
Pray for me as a Reds fan too.
Hey, they play bad teams.
I don't care.
The Cubs play bad teams this week.
The Reds are on.
They're currently tied with the Cubs. Actually, the Cubs are now in 5th in the wild card because they're behind the Cubs or behind the Reds because the Reds won the season series by a game.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, I think
cheered you up, didn't it?
Yeah. I'm still a little upset that Nick Chubb is probably done for the year, but it's all right. We got Jerome Ford, and I'm sure Kareem Hunt will be back, although he probably isn't coming back unless we pay him like a starting running back. So that was the whole dispute in the first place. But enough of that. That'll do it on this week's episode of SOSA Overtime, presented by McDonald's.
Good night, Grimace.